I'll be honest with you. I wasn't angry when he gave me 48 hours to clear my desk. Not angry, not shocked, just hollow. My boss leaned back in his chair like he was doing me a favor, folding his hands on the polished wood, eyes glinting under fluorescent light. "We're restructuring," he said, "and I need you to transition your responsibilities. Todd will be starting Monday." Todd? The same Todd who'd spent more time in our office bar than in any project meeting, the guy who thought a Gantt chart was a kind of pastry. That Todd was apparently my replacement, and I was disposable, effective immediately. The clock started at 9:12 a.m. He didn't even wait until the end of the week. 48 hours to dismantle 3 years of work. 48 hours to box my life into a flimsy carton shoved under my desk. 48 hours until the badge at my hip would go dead and I'd become just another ex-employee on a company mailing list. He smiled like it was settled. "Of course, I'll need all your documentation cleaned up. Transition notes, passwords, run books. Think of it as leaving a legacy." His tone was syrupy, the kind that covers a knife's edge. I nodded once. Didn't argue, didn't ask for fairness, because I already knew something he didn't. Every project, every client compliance audit, every security certification renewal flowed through me. Not because I hoarded work, but because I built the systems no one else bothered to. I owned the change control ledger, the vendor risk register, the quarterly compliance calendars. I had personally drafted the CAB, Change Advisory Board, approvals that governed how we deployed software. Todd wouldn't last 10 minutes without them. I walked back to my desk. The hum of the open floor swallowed me. Phones ringing, printers stuttering, the faint scent of burnt coffee clinging to the kitchenette. My team glanced up, then away. They'd heard enough from behind the glass walls. A cardboard box leaned against the wall by my chair. My boss had been efficient enough to have it delivered before the meeting. I sat down, opened a blank folder on my desktop, and named it 48H. Not out of spite, out of instinct, out of survival. The first thing I did was write a one-line note to myself. If he wants 48 hours, make every hour count. I started with policy. Company Handbook, Section 14.3, all critical access transfers require documented approval via ticketing system and dual authorization. Translation, I wasn't handing over master credentials in a hallway chat or an Excel sheet. If Todd wanted in, he'd need the kind of approvals that left permanent fingerprints. Next, compliance. I queued the quarterly SOC2 audit calendar. Our largest client's SLA was tied to that report. If anyone failed to submit documentation on time, penalties hit instantly, tens of thousands a day. Those deadlines weren't suggestions. They were legal contracts. I listed every open procurement PO. One caught my eye. Vendor Strat Edge Consulting, LLC. The invoice address matched a house in my boss's neighborhood. I knew because I'd mailed holiday cards there once. My stomach tightened. Shell company. Kickbacks. The kind of thing that gets buried if no one speaks. I didn't breathe a word. I drafted neutral questions instead. Can you confirm deliverables per PO that was 2022? Sent to procurement. CC. Compliance. Timestamped. Nothing emotional, nothing accusatory, just procedural. Because paper trails don't argue. They bleed silently until someone follows them. Todd wandered by around noon, all swagger and cologne. "So where's the password spreadsheet?" he asked, like he was ordering a coffee. "There isn't one," I said evenly. He laughed. "Come on, I know you've got something. Just email it." "No," I repeated. "Access requests go through the system. You'll need approvals." His grin faltered. "I'm senior staff now. I don't need—" I cut him off with a shrug. "It's company policy. You'll see." Then I turned back to my screen, ending the conversation. By 4 p.m., I had 3 separate documents growing in my 48-inch folder. A transition dossier, a compliance tracker, and a red flags appendix. None of them used words like fraud or retaliation, just facts, dates, ticket IDs, procurement line items, Enough that if anyone ever asked, the story would tell itself. When I finally stood up to stretch, my eyes fell on the cardboard box again. Inside was a chipped mug, a small plant with 2 yellowing leaves, and a stack of sticky notes I'd scribbled half my life onto. A junior analyst named Priya hovered nearby, biting her lip. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," I said, even though my voice sounded brittle. She hesitated, then slid a folded scrap of paper across my desk. "We saw what he did," it read in hurried ink. "We're with you." I tucked it into the folder. Didn't smile, didn't thank her, because my boss's office door was still open, and Todd was leaning against the frame, laughing too loud. 48 hours. That was the deadline he gave me. What he didn't realize was that it wasn't my countdown. It was his. Policy doesn't care about loyalty. Policy doesn't care if a boss owes his drinking buddy a promotion. Policy is cold, written in ink, and if you know how to read it, it's sharper than any blade. That was my anchor. The morning after my 48-hour countdown began, I arrived earlier than usual. The office was half dark, humming only with servers in the data room and the faint wheeze of the HVAC. I booted up, unlocked my desktop, and opened the 48-touch folder. 3 documents stared back at me like loaded weapons. Transition dossier, compliance tracker, red flags appendix. I didn't start with emotions, I started with deadlines. SOC2 quarterly audit due in 19 days. PCI DSS penetration test window in 11. HIPAA training recertification in 8. Each of those was tied to service level agreements with penalties measured in thousands per day. Every date, every tick box, every unfiled attestation was my leverage. I pasted them into the compliance tracker, highlighted the ones only I had prepared, and annotated them with pending, no secondary owner assigned. If Todd so much as sneezed wrong, clients would be invoicing us instead of paying us. Then procurement. The StratEdge consulting invoice still gnawed at me. Address, 72 Wilton Street. Crosscheck. Property records, registered to Mark Eldridge, my boss's brother-in-law. The PO amount, $148,000 for strategic enablement services. Deliverables, none. I wrote a bland email, requesting confirmation of deliverables for PO, but sent in 02. Please advise on documentation for internal audit. CC'd compliance, procurement, and audit mailbox. Neutral. Sterile. But I knew what it meant. It meant there was now an official question in the system, a question that wouldn't go away. At 9:30, my boss strolled by, coffee in hand, his smile stretched too wide. "Morning, how's the transition going?" "Documentation in progress," I replied. Good. Make sure Todd gets the master credentials by today." "Per policy, all credentials require ticketing and dual approval," I answered, tone flat. His smile twitched. "We don't need to be so rigid here. Just make it easy." I looked him straight in the eye. Section 14.3, Information Security Policy. Violations are reportable. The silence between us felt like glass about to crack. He swallowed, forced a chuckle, and walked off, muttering something about overkill. By noon, Todd decided to insert himself. He swaggered into the project war room where I was spread out with binders. "All right," he said, clapping his hands like a coach. "Let's run through your stuff. Give me the highlights. Don't bore me with the details." I closed my binder slowly. "Highlights?" "Yeah," he grinned. "Like, where's the checklist of things I should say in client calls? What's the main password? Where's the shared drive with all the runbooks?" "There is no main password," I said, "and client calls don't have checklists. They have contracts. Contracts with penalty clauses." He waved a hand. "Whatever. I'll wing it." And then, like a gift, the phone rang. A client manager on the line, prepping for next week's SOC2 readiness review. Todd answered with the confidence of a man who thought acronyms were optional. "Hi, this is Todd, new operations lead," he announced, puffing his chest. "Yeah, we're totally ready for that. SOC2, thing, it's all squared away. No worries." The client paused. "Do you have the finalized evidence package and test results?" Todd blinked. We'll circle back." I watched his face flush, his grin melt into confusion. The silence on the other end of the line stretched until it broke like a bone. Todd mumbled something incoherent, hung up, and turned to me. "You could have helped," he snapped. "I did," I said calmly, "by letting you know what you don't know." He stormed out. At 3 p.m., I drafted a preservation notice. It was the kind of document most employees never touch, used when there's potential litigation to freeze relevant data. I cited procurement irregularities and pending compliance deliverables, sent to legal, compliance, IT security. My hands trembled when I hit send, but my face stayed still. It was like placing a glass dome over everything I'd seen. No one could quietly erase it now. My boss must have sensed the walls closing in, because at 5, he cornered me near the elevators. "You're making this too complicated," he said softly, like a threat. "Just hand over what Todd needs. Don't make it ugly." I looked at him, not flinching. Policy isn't ugly. Hiding things is. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. The elevator doors opened between us, and I stepped in. Back at my desk, I saved the day's work. 3 documents now had weight. The transition dossier was 37 pages. The compliance tracker filled with dates and dependencies. The red flags appendix swelling with receipts. Each one was a time bomb, ticking silently, waiting for the right cut of wire to set it off. When I finally packed my bag, the office was dim again. Todd's voice echoed faintly from down the hall, complaining to IT about not being able to log into the deployment console. I smiled to myself. He wanted shortcuts. What he didn't realize was that every shortcut in this place was lined with knives. 48 hours. One day already gone. The blade was sharpened. All I had to do was wait for him to fall on it. When someone takes away your badge, they think they've ended your story. What they don't realize is that a badge cut at the wrong time can be a tripwire. I wasn't planning on leaving quietly. I was planning on leaving in a way that made silence impossible. By the second morning, my 40-page folder had grown into something monstrous. The transition dossier read like an operations Bible. Policies, system maps, escalation paths, screenshots, ticket IDs. The compliance tracker looked like a minefield of deadlines no one else even saw coming. And the red flags appendix? That was my blade, sharp and waiting. Every line item linked back to a receipt, an email, or a signature my boss couldn't wash off. But information alone doesn't detonate. It needs triggers. So I built them. At 8:15 a.m., I scheduled a Monday KB, Change Advisory Board, review. It was routine on paper. Every significant deployment needed approval. But this time, I blocked the agenda with high-risk items Todd couldn't possibly explain. Certificate rotations, vendor license renewals, client penetration test scheduling, all of them locked behind dual approver signatures, none of them rubber stamp material. It meant nothing could move forward without scrutiny. It meant the moment I was gone, Todd would be staring at a wall of locked doors. Then I moved to my email client, delayed send, drafted 3 separate packages. Package 1. Transition dossier, plus compliance tracker, set to go to audit chair, general counsel, and procurement lead the moment my account was disabled. Subject line, transition material, per request, innocent but nuclear once opened. Package 2, red flags appendix, scheduled for external legal counsel, the company kept on retainer. Subject line, preservation notice, supplemental. That one wasn't innocent at all. Package 3. Client notifications auto-generated by the compliance calendar. If my name was stripped as owner of record, the system would alert 2 Fortune 500 clients that their compliance contact had changed. Those contracts had clauses that force reviews, with penalties attached. By noon, the stage was set. All I had to do was keep working like nothing had changed. That afternoon, my boss dropped by with Todd trailing like a shadow. "How's the documentation?" he asked, voice too casual. "On track," I said. "Good. Todd needs you to walk him through the credential flows." Todd smirked. Yeah, just show me the master password list. I turned my screen, showing him the ticketing dashboard. Every credential has a ticket. Every ticket has an approver. No list, no shortcuts. Todd frowned. This is ridiculous. How am I supposed to lead if I don't have access? By earning it, I replied. My boss's jaw flexed. Let's not get dramatic. Just make it easy. I smiled faintly. Easy is expensive. They left, both muttering. I saved my work twice, then backed it up to an encrypted drive I slipped into my bag. Not because I wanted revenge, because truth deserves protection. At 4:45 p.m., I began packing. The cardboard box filled with the detritus of 3 years, a mug chipped at the rim, a stapler that jammed twice a week, a plant leaning tiredly toward the light. My fingers lingered on each item longer than I meant them to. Every scrape, every note, every late-night coffee was in those objects. Priya, the junior analyst, hovered nearby again. "You're leaving tomorrow?" she whispered. "Tomorrow," I nodded. Her eyes shimmered. "It's not fair." "No," I agreed, "but it's not over." At 5:10, the office emptied into the evening hum. I sat in the dim, watching the red cursor blink on my screen. I thought about the preservation notice already logged, the emails queued like arrows on a bowstring, the cabbie meeting waiting like a locked gate. I knew the moment my badge stopped working, everything would fire. My boss thought he'd end my story with a cardboard box. What he didn't realize was that I'd turned that box into a trigger. That night, I carried the plant and mug to my car. The mug rattled against the ceramic pot, both fragile, both scarred. I buckled them into the passenger seat, like they mattered more than they should. In a way, they did. They were proof that I'd been there, that I'd built something real. When I got home, I set the plant on the windowsill and poured whiskey into the chip mug. I opened my laptop one more time, reviewed the delayed sends, checked the encryption keys, and shut it down. The countdown had less than 24 hours left. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing I wouldn't sleep. Tomorrow, they'd cut my badge, and when they did, they'd cut themselves. There's a sound you never forget, the hollow click when your badge is denied. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just final. At 5:02 p.m. on Friday, I swiped out for the last time. The light blinked red, the door stayed shut. Behind me, the security guard gave a half shrug, the kind he'd given a dozen others before. For him, it was routine. For me, it was ignition, because in the same second my access was cut, the first arrow flew. Package 1, the transition dossier and compliance tracker, delivered itself neatly into the inboxes of the audit chair, general counsel, and procurement lead. The subject line looked polite enough, nothing more than transition material, per request, but polite envelopes can hold blades. By the time they opened it, every deadline, every contract clause, every pending compliance obligation screamed in black and white. No secondary owner assigned, risk of breach imminent. Package 2, the red flag's appendix, slid silently into the hands of external legal counsel. Procurement irregularities, vendor invoices, Strat Edge consulting tied by property records to my boss's brother-in-law. No accusations, no commentary, just evidence arranged like dominoes. One touch, and the line would fall. And then there was Package 3. That one didn't go to people inside the building. That one went to our clients. Automated compliance calendar notices fired the moment my name was stripped as owner of record. 2 Fortune 500 clients received alerts. Your compliance contact has changed. Review required under SLA Section 7.2. Those words weren't negotiable. They triggered contractually binding reviews, and reviews meant auditors, lawyers, penalties. By the time I drove home, my phone was buzzing with texts from old teammates. "What did you do?" "Audit's in the building. Legal is freaking out." I didn't answer. I poured coffee into my chipped mug, sat at my kitchen table, and waited. Saturday morning, the first cracks spread. One of the clients called procurement directly, demanding clarification on the contact change. They cited the contract. threatened to halt payments, and requested all compliance evidence be resent. Todd, suddenly the operations lead, couldn't produce a single document. He didn't even know where the files lived. By noon, Li Gao had already opened an internal investigation. My preservation notice was on their desk, frozen in the system. They couldn't bury it, couldn't shred it. The questions I'd seeded in procurement were now official entries in the workflow. They had to be answered. Meanwhile, the CAB meeting I'd scheduled for Monday loomed like a guillotine. No one could deploy without passing it, and the agenda items were loaded with dependencies Todd couldn't navigate. Certificate rotations, vendor license renewals, audit evidence submissions. If he failed even one, contracts triggered penalties. If he tried to bypass KB approval, that was a violation logged by policy. Either way, the walls were closing. Sunday night, my former co-worker Priya called me from her personal phone, whispering like she was hiding in a closet. "They're panicking," she said. "Todd can't answer anything. The clients are furious. Your boss spent the whole day trying to convince legal that you were just being difficult. They didn't buy it. They asked for everything in writing. He doesn't have it." I listened in silence, the weight of her words landing like quiet thunder. "And," she hesitated, the audit chair asked if anyone had seen unusual vendor invoices. Procurement pulled up StratEdge. They're connecting the dots. When she hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. I hadn't set a fire. I just removed the fire extinguisher and let the sparks land where they were already falling. Monday morning arrived like the drop of a curtain. Cab convened at 8:00 sharp. I wasn't there, but word traveled fast. Todd stumbled through his introduction, tried to bluff his way through acronyms he didn't understand, failed to produce a single approval chain. When asked to verify vendor deliverables, he froze. When asked about upcoming SOC2 evidence, he muttered something about spreadsheets. The silence that followed was recorded in the meeting, minutes like a death rattle. At 10:30, one of the clients formally filed an SLA breach notice. That alone was worth hundreds of thousands in penalties. Another client suspended a deployment until their legal team finished review. Revenue stopped. Panic began. By lunch, my boss was locked in a glass-walled conference room with HR, legal, and outside counsel. He gestured wildly through the window, his face a shade redder than I'd ever seen. Todd sat outside, slumped, fiddling with his phone like a teenager waiting for detention to end. And me? I was at home, sunlight warming the small plant on my windowsill, coffee cooling in my chipped mug. I hadn't lifted a finger since Friday night. Everything was already in motion. The badge was dead. The tripwire had been tripped, and now the fallout was theirs to live in. Consequences don't announce themselves. They just arrive, quietly at first, then all at once, like a ceiling collapsing after years of strain. Monday afternoon was that collapse. By 2 p.m., my former boss was officially on administrative leave pending investigation. The word spread through Slack like wildfire. No one needed translation. He'd been benched, stripped of authority, badge frozen, laptop confiscated. He'd left the building pale and silent, jacket crumpled in his fist. Todd was still there, but unraveling. Clients had already escalated. During the KAB disaster, one CISO asked a simple question: "What's your risk register look like?" Todd blinked like the man had spoken Greek. Then he stammered something about needing to check with the team. The CISO cut him off cold. "If you can't answer that in this meeting, you are not the operations lead." That line was noted, recorded, forwarded to legal. By Tuesday morning, SLA penalties had already crossed into 6 figures. One Fortune 500 client filed a formal breach notice, citing failure to provide qualified compliance contacts. Another demanded a credit against their quarterly invoice. Procurement froze all open POs pending review, and when StratEdge Consulting's paperwork surfaced, the smell of rot was undeniable. Shell company, no deliverables, $48,000 down a black hole. And the registered property tied straight to my boss's brother-in-law. The board couldn't look away. Too many receipts. Too many clients screaming. Too many contracts bleeding money. That's when the phone rang. It was legal. Then audit. Then the board secretary. They wanted me. Not as an employee, but as a consultant. Could I return temporarily to stabilize operations while the investigation unfolded? Could I help them patch compliance before regulators came calling? I let silence hang on the line, long enough for them to taste it. Then I answered, calm and measured, "I'll consider it under conditions." "What conditions?" the secretary asked, voice tight. "Triple my former rate. Written autonomy over compliance operations, and retention bonuses for my 3 junior analysts. If I step into this, they're protected." There was no negotiation. Within the hour, I had a contract in my inbox. Triple rate, autonomy in writing, and bonus clauses for my team. I signed. That afternoon, I walked back into the building, not as an employee, not as someone begging for their desk back, but as an external consultant on my own terms. The air felt different. Eyes followed me, some filled with relief, some with guilt. Priya met me at the elevator with a smile that looked dangerously close to tears. "You're back?" she whispered. "I'm here," I said, "but not for them. For us." At 3 p.m., I sat in a glass conference room across from Todd. He slouched in his chair, phone in hand, pretending he belonged. I opened my laptop, projected the compliance tracker on the screen, and asked, "Can you walk me through the current status of SOC2 evidence submissions?" He froze. "PCI DSS penetration test window?" I pressed. Nothing. "HIPAA training recertifications?" Silence. His face burned crimson. He looked at the board observers through the glass, like a drowning man reaching for shore. No one moved. Finally he muttered, "I'll need to check with someone." "Which someone?" I asked. Voice calm, precise. "Because the only someone who built this system was me, and you tried to replace me with a drinking buddy." The board chair scribbled a note. Todd lowered his head. He didn't speak again. By Wednesday, the picture was complete. Procurement confirmed the kickback trail. Compliance documented missed deadlines. Legal flagged retaliation against me in the transition. The verdict was inevitable. My boss was terminated for cause. Benefits stripped. Referred to regulators. Civil recovery proceedings began. Todd? He was quietly removed from access, escorted out by security. No title, no farewell, no second chances, just gone. And me? I wasn't celebrating. I was busy. Restoring compliance calendars, rotating credentials, stabilizing deployments. I did the work while the wreckage of their arrogance smoldered around me. The juniors finally exhaled. Priya handed me a coffee, hands still trembling, and whispered, "You saved us." I shook my head. I didn't save anyone. Policy did, truth did. I just didn't let them bury it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, chipped mug warm in my hands, plant steady on the sill. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the silence was clean. My boss's nightmare had begun when he gave me 48 hours. Now, it was in full bloom, and it wasn't done yet. Closure doesn't come with applause. It comes with paperwork, signatures, and the quiet knowledge that the truth outlived the lies. The week after my termination, I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a consultant, walking the halls of the same building on my own terms, watching the fallout settle like ash after a fire. The first order of business was stabilization. I reopened the compliance calendars, reassigned owners properly, and filed the delayed submissions. Certificates renewed, audits rescheduled, client reviews document. The machine sputtered, but it ran, and this time no one dared cut corners. Next came credentials. I rotated every root password, revoked Todd's lingering access, and set new dual control policies that couldn't be bypassed by verbal approvals. Its security backed me in writing. For the first time in months, we weren't just following the letter of the policy. We were enforcing it. Procurement was messier. Strategy Consulting was killed on paper, flagged as a fraudulent vendor. Legal drafted recovery notices, clawback demands, and civil suits. External investigators traced every invoice, every payment. The line of ink ended at my boss's doorstep. He didn't just lose his job, he lost the shield of silence. The regulators weren't knocking yet, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. The juniors, Priya, Mark, and Ellen, got their retention bonuses written into their contracts. They cried when the first checks cleared. For them, it wasn't just money. It was proof someone had seen them, fought for them. That mattered more than any title. Todd? He didn't even merit a footnote. HR scrubbed his name from directories. Clients were told only that the operations lead has been reassigned. Behind closed doors, people called him a liability, a cautionary tale. The man who thought a Gantt chart was a pastry was gone before he'd ever begun. And my boss, I almost felt sorry for him when the news hit. Almost. Terminated for cause. Referral to regulatory authorities. Civil action initiated. His LinkedIn went dark. The man who thought he was untouchable, who believed favors and family ties would protect him, was just another headline waiting to rot in archives. But here's the thing about revenge. It's hollow if you chase it. What I felt wasn't triumph, and it wasn't glee. It was steadiness, relief, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that truth had weight, and when given room, it crushed lies on its own. One evening, after a long day of untangling the mess, I lingered by the windowsill. The plant I'd rescued from my desk leaned into the light. Greener now, alive. My chipped mug sat warm in my hands, coffee steaming into the cool night air. I thought about the note Priya had slipped me. We saw what he did. We're with you. I thought about the silence that followed every time Todd tried to bluff. I thought about the click of my dead badge, and how that sound had signaled not my end, but his. If there was a lesson in any of it, it was this. Never underestimate someone who builds quietly, because the ones who build also know where the foundations crack. My boss gave me 48 hours to clear my desk for his new hire. He thought it would erase me. Instead, it erased him. His worst nightmare didn't begin when the investigation opened. It didn't begin when clients filed breach notices, or when procurement found his shell vendor. It began the moment he set the clock ticking. Because in those 48 hours, I built the fuse. And when he cut me loose, all I did was let it burn.